You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the 2009 Star Trek movie by J.J. Abrams, which you have to specify, otherwise it's just Star Trek. And I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hey, Father Corey.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Aiken. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us where you find us. We're on X at SQPN. We're on Instagram. And leave us comments wherever you find us. We really do appreciate hearing from you. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called The Catholics of Oz, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Oz. O-Z. So we are talking about this 2009 movie. Jimmy, couldn't you give us a recap of what happens in Star Trek?
This week, the Enterprise is in deep space when it encounters an astonishingly intense storm of lens flares and Dutch camera angles. We open on the USS Kelvin, which is attacked by a mystery Romulan ship that comes through a time warp. After the Romulans kill its nameless captain, George Kirk is in command. He orders an evacuation of the crew, which includes his wife, who has given birth to their son, James T. Kirk. George Kirk then rams the Romulan ship in the longest ramming speed scene in cinematic history, destroying himself and the Kelvin and severely damaging the Romulans. This creates the new Kelvin timeline. Years later, we see a young James Kirk recklessly driving an antique convertible into the Grand Canyon, which is now in Iowa. Years later, we see Kirk getting into a barroom brawl and then a meeting with Captain Pike, who tells him that he should join Starfleet like his father. Years later, yet again, Kirk is about to graduate from Starfleet Academy, and he reprograms the Kobayashi Maru test and cheats. But as a disciplinary hearing is being held, a distress call comes from Vulcan. It's being menaced by the mysterious Romulan ship, which is mysteriously back, and all cadets are quickly assigned to a small group of ships. All of them, but the Enterprise, which arrives late to the party, are destroyed by the Romulans. The Romulans then order Captain Pike to come aboard, and before leaving, he promotes First Officer Spock to acting captain and Cadet Kirk to acting first officer. The captain of the Romulan ship, Nero, then uses red matter to turn Vulcan into a black hole, killing all the Vulcans on it and Spock's mother, Amanda. Captain Spock and acting first officer Kirk have a falling out about what to do next, and Spock irrationally maroons Kirk on an ice planet in the Vulcan system. There, Kirk meets up with an older version of Spock from the Prime Timeline, and old Spock reveals to Kirk that Romulus was destroyed in the Prime Timeline, and Nero blames old Spock for this and stranded him on the ice planet to make him watch the destruction of Vulcan. Kirk and old Spock then go to a Starfleet base on the planet where they meet Montgomery Scott, who is able to beam himself and Kirk onto the Enterprise while it's at warp. Kirk then antagonizes Spock to reveal the fact that Spock is emotionally compromised by the death of his planet and his mother, and this causes Spock to resign as acting captain, which makes acting first officer Cadet Kirk the new acting captain. Kirk then orders them to head to Nero's next target, which is Earth, and he and Spock beam over to the Romulan ship. Young Spock steals old Spock's ship from the Romulans, and Kirk rescues Captain Pike. Young Spock then thwarts the Romulans' plans to turn Earth into a black hole, and then he rams the Romulan ship with old Spock's ship, which ignites the red matter in it and creates a new black hole. But Scotty beams Kirk, Spock, and Pike away from their respective ships just in time. The Romulan ship is too near the black hole to survive, so Kirk offers to help Nero and his crew escape. Nero refuses, and Kirk irrationally opens fire and kills them all. Afterwards, Cadet Kirk is promoted directly to being the captain of the Enterprise. Young Spock has a conversation with old Spock, who urges him to remain in Starfleet. And we get a final scene of the traditional crew of the Enterprise warping off to new adventures amid a cloud of lens flares and a bridge that looks like an Apple store. The end.
Father Corey, your impression of this one?
You know, I have always liked this movie, but not as a Star Trek movie. It's a fun action adventure, escapist. Just enjoy it. But it's not a Star Trek movie. You know, it's just
It's a Star
Yeah,
Wars movie.
It's a Star Wars movie, and even that's kind of insulting Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I like I said, I enjoy it. I just, of course, there's the whole controversy of the Kelvin timeline versus Prime timeline and all that. But it's just it's a fun
We'll get into
movie.
that.
I would just wish it wasn't Star Wars or Star Trek.
Jimmy?
There's a lot of fun stuff here. This is not as Star Warsy as J.J. Abrams is going to go. It was. I mean, I noticed Star Wars like elements in this, but in Star Trek Into Darkness, the second movie, wow, did that want to be a Star Wars movie?
Yeah.
But there are some elements like Star Wars in this, like ridiculously high catwalks with no guardrails, so people fall off of them in long, slow fall-in deaths. But there is fun stuff. My memory going into watching this was that I thought it was less well done than it is. I think it is actually pretty well done with the exception of a few sequences.
Right.
Like the Grand Canyon sequence in Iowa where Kirk is being super reckless. There are elements of that are good, but it's ultimately overplayed. Similarly, at the ending of, Kirk goes directly from cadet to captain that's just not believable.
I hate that. Hate it. It's my least favorite thing about this whole movie because it's dumb. Sorry. Did you have anything else you wanted to?
No, that's it. Okay. I think much of the movie was successful. What I did when I rewatched it was I took note of the major sequences in the movie, and I would say, well, this one didn't work, but most of them I thought worked.
So I like the cast. I like Pine as Kirk. I like Zach Quinto as Spock. I think, in fact, I like his Spock a little better than Ethan Peck's. Honestly, I mean, I could go either way, but I like the cast. I like Zoe Saldana as Uhura. The whole thing. My criticisms are J.J. Abrams does this all the time. Everything is too close. Like space in J.J. Abrams' imagination is about 600 miles wide, and it takes 10 seconds to get everywhere.
They established on screen, Vulcan is 3 minutes from Earth. How? No. I
don't care what warp you're going.
Well, 3 minutes from Earth, and it took 5 minutes of screen time to get there.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like he did in Force Awakens, where you could see all of these planets exploding when Starkiller Base blew them up, like from the surface of a planet. Like, were they moons? Like, it just does. It's I don't know what he's doing there, but and then the whole cadets command, being put in command of a starship. I know that to have a satisfying ending, you want Kirk to be in the captain's seat, but that's just, I don't care.
Put in a 3-year jump or something.
Right. I don't care how much, like even 3 years would be pushing it, but
yeah.
I don't care how talented that cadet is. He is not being put in command of a starship.
Right. I mean, I could see if he was the rank of lieutenant.
Yes.
That could be a little bit more plausible, especially
in an older ship.
Well, in a battlefield promotion like that, okay. But going from lieutenant to captain, that's not going to happen.
Right. In the most advanced brand new starship, by the way. That's the other thing, is the Enterprise was brand new and advanced and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah. Interesting that there's a different theory of time travel that they're working with here. So an alternate timeline, whereas previously in Star Trek, we've had time, when they go back, they change, going back in time changes the prime timeline. We saw that in The Voyage Home. We saw that in First Contact, and other places where people went back, they changed something, and it changed the future of the prime timeline. This one is, we've created a diverging timeline.
No, I don't think that's a different theory of time travel, though. It's just this time, nobody goes back to the prime timeline.
Right.
And the Romulans stay in the Kelvin timeline, and they and Spock stay in the Kelvin timeline. They were the only people who came back. No one goes back to the future, so they just stay in the alternate timeline.
I suppose it goes to what your canon theory then. Does Picard and Lower Decks and all the other stuff that takes place after the destruction of Romulus, does that exist in this universe or not? Are we going to separate them into two different complete canons.
There are two different timelines. And
Right.
so, after Spock and Nero vanished from the Prime timeline kept going just the way it always had.
Think of Back to the Future, where you've got 1985A, where it's when Biff goes back, changes the timeline. So then there's the alternate timeline, 1985A, and then Marty goes back and fixes that and is back on the regular timeline again.
Right.
This is that Marty had never gone back to change the alternate timeline.
Okay.
It's just a question of which timeline are you experiencing.
Right.
But both timelines are equally real and equally valid.
So if Spock had gone back, it would have reset the Prime timeline.
Yeah, if he had gone back and prevented Romulus from being destroyed, then this timeline would remain unexplored.
Right. Or Nero going back.
Or if Nero was stopped before he could destroy the Kelvin.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Some interesting behind the scenes bits. George Kirk played by a pre-Thor Chris Hemsworth with an American accent, which is kind of interesting to see. There's been talk about trying to bring him back for future Star Trek movies with this cast as George Kirk. I'm not sure how that would work or whether it would be worthwhile.
This would involve time travel.
It would.
Yeah. Well, and this would, obviously the amount of money they pay him to bring him back would be significantly higher.
But he'd be a huge draw. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm doubtful that those plans are going to come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is really kind of his first major role, kind of, because he's only in the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, but I liked him in the time he was there. I mean, that was pretty good. Just some other interesting casting in this. Eric Bana. I don't forget how you pronounce it as Nero. He was the Hulk.
Yeah, he is nowhere near as good as Khan. They keep trying to give us a center villain in modern Star Trek movies, and it's just not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
The best Star Trek, 2 was one of the best, but there is no central villain. There's no villain at all in Search for Whales in 4, and it's a conspiracy. There's no center villain in 6. The Berlin Wall comes down in space. Those are the best 3 best Trek movies, and only one of them had a center villain.
Even Search for No,
I was going to say 6. You could kind of argue that Christopher Plummer is, but sort of.
Yeah,
but not
he's
completely.
just out there chewing scenery.
Yeah.
Other things, a couple of behind the scenes facts. I really love the score, the Michael Giacchino score. I think I love Giacchino as a music music guy, composer, and so I really love the score. And originally this was supposed to be after Nemesis was a box office flop. They didn't make Star Trek for a while, and they wanted to revive the franchise. And so the original idea was to make this a prequel instead of an alternate timeline, which would have been interesting because that's eventually what they did with Discovery, was making a prequel. Kind of interesting how often that's been a thing they want to do.
Could you imagine if they tried to make a movie out of Discovery? Oh, that would be hideous.
They're also going way back into the Gene Roddenberry era. Had been a lot of discussion of making a Starfleet Academy movie where we learn how Kirk, Spock, and Bones all met, and that's what this is.
Yeah. This is also the first time we get that aesthetic that we've got now, where stuff that happens in past of Trek looks more advanced than what we saw in TOS and TNG. In the past, previously when they'd gone in the past, like in More Tribbles, I think it was the DS9 episode, they gave us exactly what TOS looked like. But this, they wanted to update it, make it look like an Apple store, as you mentioned. On the bridge.
I thought it was Trials and Tribulation.
Tribulations. Gosh, what was I thinking of? Yeah, Trials and Tribulations. So that was an interesting aspect to this to me. One thing I did not like as a ship geek is how the interiors of the ship look like a standard chemical factory floor. Like
it was actually a brewery in England.
They filmed it at a factory. Yeah,
right. I just don't. It doesn't make sense that that's what a starship would look like. I look at Strange New Worlds, and they're engineering all this. So that feels like a futuristic. This doesn't feel futuristic. That's bad decision.
I don't know why they chose a brewery, and especially a brewery because you have the cleanliness issues of an actual producing food and drink plant that they had to be careful for, and that was actual concern as they were filming, is making sure they didn't run afoul of any kind of rules for that.
I think the reason they did it is because they wanted to have Scotty. They wanted to have that supposedly comedic sequence of Scotty beaming into the water, the plumbing system of the Enterprise, and then going through these gigantic glass tubes. And they found a brewery that had transparent tubes in it. So let's shove Simon Pegg in those. And
I don't even think those were part of the. I think they put those in, but it matched with the rest of the stuff that was there.
Yeah, it also the ridiculous safety protocols in those things. That was completely unbelievable.
Yeah. And what's a water turbine for on board a starship? Like I was kind of figuring out, like, what does this thing do except move water around? It's a really big water pump. So it's also interesting to me that this is where we get the destruction of Romulus. This is what a huge element in Picard. I don't think it really shows up much in Lower Decks, but it's a huge part of Picard, and I think that's an interesting aspect.
And the science is all wrong because Spock says a star went supernova and it was going to threaten the entire galaxy.
Yep.
And so that's why he had to take red matter to shut it down, to keep it from destroying the galaxy, but he didn't manage to do it in time to save Romulus, which is why Nero blamed him. Okay, stars that explode do not endanger all of a galaxy the size of the Milky Way. That is not how it works.
Yeah.
They may damage local systems, but they're not going to destroy everything in the galaxy.
Yep.
And even if they were big enough, they can only travel at the speed of light.
It would take 100,000 years for the shockwave to cross the Milky Way.
Yeah.
Right. And even if like Romulus is like the very next star system to whatever is going supernova, unless it's Romulus's own sun that's supernovaing, exploding.
You can evacuate everybody at warp speed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think don't they eventually retcon that in Prime Universe that it was Romulus's sun?
In the novel, I believe they do.
Yeah. When we talked about that novel that covers that period of time where Picard was helping evacuate Romulus, they come up with a reason why, because the author, her name
Una McCormick.
Thank you.
Yep.
Saw the same problem what we do and tried to fix it in the plot of why this supernova event was not just a normal supernova, and tried to fix it for us. But it is problematic in this movie anyway.
And I should mention too that the red matter, what it does is it creates a singularity.
Yes.
When it interacts with regular matter, it creates a singularity, and that's how the plot. The idea was that Spock was going to use the red matter to basically suck all the supernova matter into the singularity.
Yeah, that's not how black holes work, but okay.
Yeah. Plus, a supernova, our sun went supernova, so let's put a black hole there instead. That should save everything.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's better. But and plus the idea that you have a tiny drop creates a supernova that could destroy, a black hole that can destroy a planet, and you have this huge ball. That seems like a really, a lot of danger.
Yeah, and we're talking a tiny drop. We're talking a pea-sized, literally the size of a pea.
Yeah. A lot of people really ragged on the red matter as a kind of a J.J. Abrams trope.
Yeah.
And I'm not familiar enough with the rest of his catalog to comment on that, but I didn't have a problem with it. It doesn't make sense in terms of modern science, but we're not talking modern science.
Yeah. Star Trek. We have to. There's a lot of stuff we take for granted in Star Trek, including transporters. Mm-hmm. Like with a lot of J.J. Abrams stories, it's a story about the impact of fathers and fatherhood and the difference that a father makes in a life, and how a son wants to live up to a father's example. In this case, we see the difference that George Kirk's death at Jim Kirk's birth affects his life. That he doesn't advance, as the golden boy per se. He becomes a rebel and troubled as a child.
And that's the purpose of the Grand Canyon sequence. But the execution of it's to show us, he's from a broken home. He's got a stepfather he doesn't like. He's lashing out as a kid. All of that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
They just do it in an over-the-top way.
Right.
Where, for some reason, the Grand Canyon is now in Iowa.
Well, I think it's supposed to be a
quarry.
quarry.
Yeah.
But it looks like the Grand Canyon.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's too big.
And then he's racing towards it. And his father calls him on the phone as he's driving towards it, and he's telling him, if you get a scratch on my antique car, you're doomed and stuff like that. And he's just been warned. Mm-hmm. And we have no setup for this. It's not like we saw him having a confrontation with his stepfather and then he storms out of the house. For all we can tell, this is a joyride.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's driving this thing right towards the big edge and jumps out at the last minute and has to claw his way to keep from going over himself. This is just suicidally reckless. This is not properly set up.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, of course, you got the product placement with the Nokia phone, with the Nokia futuristic Nokia tone.
Well, that was funny to me because it's like the danger of product placement, putting current technology in sci-fi in the future. Your stuff may not exist then. Actually,
well, and they've got Budweiser Classic, which by the way, Budweiser's never a classic, and Jack Daniels as well. So
yeah, those do also show up. Product placement. I do have a note. Where are there cliffs like that in Iowa? But it looked like a quarry. Like they were in the background. You could see where
excavation marks.
They also put the shipyards for starships in Iowa too.
And that makes, I'm sorry, orbital shipyard construction is the way to go. It makes no sense to build a ship like that on the surface of the planet.
Right.
Well, I could see having pieces, doing parts of the ship in modular assembly out in space, but not the full ship.
Yeah. And then we switch to Spock, and we see Spock's story about being bullied. Vulcan child bullies.
This should have been so much better because they've established that he was bullied. I mean, that's in yesteryear in the animated series, but here they're like pushing him physically, and they're getting into a physical fight, and they're using emotional terms, talking. My vision of Vulcan bullying is so much better.
Yeah.
What they should have done is come up and bullied him intellectually.
Yeah.
And, like they're citing equations and obscure facts and demanding that he answer impossibly hard questions. I mean, that would have been a satisfying Vulcan child bullying scene.
It does somewhat make sense because Spock is half human that they would be trying to get the human reaction. But also, again, they could have done it differently.
Yeah. Children, even human children, are not emotionally mature. I could see Vulcan children not being logically mature. I guess
I can see that. Yeah. It's just it would have been so much more artistic to have it not be exactly like human bullying.
Right. I know. And then we get, we do a lot of jumping through the years in the early parts of this movie.
Oh, by the way, when Sarek is talking to him afterwards, they're sitting up against this backlight. It's like a window, a stained glass window or something. And you can just see the blood vessels in the child actor's human ear, and they're not green. He's got a little bit of green blood coming off of his lip from the bullying, but that
was the human blood vessel that because he's half human, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we retcon that. And that's when the Sarek tells him you've got to choose to be Vulcan or human. You have a path, and you need to choose that path.
But it's your choice.
But it's your choice, right? And then when he gets to the Vulcan Science Academy, which is like apparently harder to get into than MIT and Harvard combined, we're going to let you in. Which it's remarkable that you succeeded despite the handicap of your mother being human. Like you just insulted his mother, and that's when he tells them they can take his application and put it where the Vulcan sun don't shine.
Yeah. I like the one, the official who was speaking was William Morgan Shepherd, who we've
Yes.
seen in both Doctor Who and Babylon 5.
Yeah, and I think also previous in Star Trek too. I think I'm not certain.
Yeah,
but
he's been in a couple of roles in Star Trek before.
It's the voice. He's got that great voice.
Voice and look, you know.
I do like at the end when Spock tells him he's not going to go to the Vulcan Science Academy. You know, G. Morgan Shepherd says, "This isn't an emotional reaction, is it?" And he says, "The only emotion I'm feeling is gratitude." Which is such a burn, but that's a great Vulcan burn.
That is
because I'm thanking you for showing me the bigot you really are, so I don't have to have any more thing to do with you.
So this Captain Pike is
not as good as Ethan as the Strange
Anson
New
Mount.
World's Captain Pike.
Yeah. Anson Mount is. I love Bruce Greenwood. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great actor, but no, Anson Mount is a better Pike, and that's a better character.
Oh, before we go on to Pike, we should mention that Amanda Grayson's played by Winona Ryder.
Winona Ryder. That's right.
Yep. But yeah, I like Bruce Greenwood's Pike at the time. But now that we've seen Anson Mount, and Bruce Greenwood doesn't have the hair. I mean, that right there that just changes everything.
Well, I just the Pike of Strange New Worlds is so better, much more fleshed out. But it's interesting to see Pike played here as someone Kirk would have known growing up after his father died, and is sort of taking a mentor role with him. I don't like what happens in Into Darkness, which is we'll talk about when we get to that. But it is interesting here. He does tell him you can be an officer after the bar fight, which is funny in the introduction of Uhura. You can be an officer in 4 years and have your own ship in 8, which, like, I don't know, even 4 years out of the academy sounds like it's pushing it, but I suppose a lieutenant commanding a small tugboat or something, that would be possible. But he says, this was an interesting line. Your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes. He saved 800 lives, including your mother's and you, by the way. I don't think he actually said that. Oh, no, he does say
he does say that. Yep.
Yeah. And I dare you to do better. Which, what a great line that is. Like, this is what your dad did. What can you do? And that's what he does, right? But, it was good. So he does take the challenge. That's when we meet Carl Urban as McCoy. I really like Carl Urban's McCoy. Really good.
I like it, too. The accent needed to be stronger. But, but I like his McCoy. What I don't like is the retcon they did on his nickname.
Yep.
Because in the original series, Kirk always called him Bones for the obvious reason he's a Sawbones.
Yep. Yeah. The old Sawbones.
And that made total sense. And here they retcon it into, my wife took everything after the divorce. Okay, that fits with McCoy's history from the original series. He was divorced. All I got left is my bones, which is a ridiculous line.
Yeah.
And every time you use your nickname, you're going to be reminding your friend of a painful event in his life.
Exactly.
That's absurd.
I did like the switch in there, between that scene and then when they're going up to the Enterprise, where Kirk is excited. He wants, he see everything. Bones wants to hide in a windowless room so that he doesn't see space.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then they're going to Enterprise, and Kirk is sick because Bones basically drugged him so he could get him onto the ship. And Bones is just looking out the window, excited as could be. Oh, this is so great. This is so wonderful.
I like how the early Bones in the first scene we meet him, he says, space is disease and danger wrapped in darkness and silence. And it's like, okay, I can buy the original McCoy saying that line.
And it's given Star Trek, yes, that is an accurate description.
I also really liked the counterpoint they did where so Spock is kind of the prosecutor at the disciplinary hearing against Kirk, and he's making these points about what the Kobayashi Maru test is for and how you've cheated it and stuff like that. And then they all get called away to go to the hangar bay because of the distress call from Vulcan. And Spock says, "Who was that pointy-eared, illegitimate person?"
Yes.
And McCoy says, "I don't know, but I like him." That's nice. That's good.
Yep. That was a nice comment. Actually, Spock really gets a dig in on Kirk here. He says, the Kobayashi Maru test was designed to test a candidate's experience, fear, accept it, maintain control of oneself and one's crew. A captain should understand that he can't cheat death. You of all people should, given your personal history, should understand. Wow, that was.
And of course, Kirk's hackles go up at that moment. I mean, he's like, "What do you mean, me of all people?"
And then we get the ridiculous. The entire Starfleet is somewhere called the Laurentian system. The entire fleet, except for these handful of brand new starships and a bunch of cadets. So let's send them off. And it's like.
Well, it's not quite as bad as that because, like, the Enterprise is captained by Captain Pike, and it's got on board another doctor that's senior to McCoy.
Yeah,
and
there's a handful of officers.
It's got Chekhov and Sulu, and they're out of the academy. They're regular officers.
Right.
No, Chekhov was still a cadet.
He was 17.
But Sulu was lieutenant.
Yeah, Chekhov was 17.
Because that was the whole scene. Cadet Chekhov, W, and it couldn't read his voice print.
So we have also a relationship between Spock and Uhura, which is interesting, hinted at in the original series.
Yeah, I was fine with that. They had a little bit of flirtation in the original series. It never went anywhere, and it was really on Uhura's part. She was flirting at Spock, not with Spock.
Yeah.
But that signaled, some interest on her part, and I don't mind them doing that in an alternative universe take on the relationship.
Now,
interesting, the human Spock, thing. Yep.
Yeah. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is where we get her first name, Nyota.
It's the first time in on screen.
Yes.
Right.
It had appeared previously along with a couple of other names in expanded media.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So this is the canon acceptance of that name.
Right. We've canonized Nyota as her name, which is fun. The fun, withholding it the whole time. From
her
Kirk.
name's Nyota.
That's for her to tell you, or however it was. Then we have the really fun action sequence of the orbital skydiving into Vulcan's atmosphere.
I love how when Captain Pike says, "Who here has combat experience?" and Sulu raises his hand, and then later when they're on the shuttle to go down to the orbital drill. Kirk says, "So what's your training in?" And he says, fencing, which is a great line, but Sulu had martial arts experience too.
Yeah. But it's a callback.
But it is a callback. And then when we see he's not just fencing with a foil, he's got this retractable katana.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
He goes to town with that thing.
He impales one of the Romulans. Yeah. That was good.
And of course, you got the red shirt who's the little too eager to get into combat. Red shirt. Oh, I've got it. I've got the explosives. It's like, oh yeah, this guy's dead.
By the way, now just before this, so they got to Vulcan and Nero started talking to them on FaceTime, and I like his introduction. Captain Pike says, "My name is Christopher Pike. I'm in command of the USS Enterprise." Blah blah blah, and Nero says, "Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero."
Yeah,
right. He's just very casual about it.
He's a captain of a mining ship. He's not Romulan Navy or whatever. Right.
I do think that even though the mining ship is from 129 years in the future, I don't think it should be as powerful as they make it appear. It shouldn't outclass a combat vessel.
Right.
This way.
Right.
Well, at a minimum, it should be an equivalent, especially with the upgrades he's done to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, also, they don't explain this in the film. If you watch carefully, there are little hints of it, but there is an explanation for, why did they vanish for 25 years? They appear, they attack the Kelvin, Kirk damages but does not destroy their ship, and then 25 years later, they're back. What happened to them in the interim? Well, there is an explanation. It just didn't all make it on screen. They were captured by the Klingons, who put them on Rura Penthe.
Oh.
And then they escaped from Rura Penthe and got their ship back and killed a bunch of Klingon ships, which Uhura mentions on screen, saying, I translated this message from, Rura Penthe about all these ships getting destroyed. Well, that was them.
Oh.
But so there is actually an explanation. I don't know how they got their ship back, but they were on the prison planet for 25 years, and then they got the ship. They escaped and got the ship back.
And they do mention that the Nero ship destroyed those vessels, that it was Nero on screen,
Right.
but it doesn't say that Nero or some of his crew was on the planet.
So the most controversial part of this movie for some fans was the destruction of Vulcan.
Yeah, bad move.
Yeah.
Bad move. Also, notice the cut and paste Vasquez rocks on Vulcan.
Yes, I was thinking
That was
that
crumbling.
myself. Yeah. Vulcan and Vulcans are one of the defining features of Star Trek that set it apart from all other sci-fi franchises. And I get that you're trying to do something big, but I think it's a step too far. I think, this isn't Alderaan, a planet we've never seen, and whose main impact is on the one character that we know. This is all of Vulcan. As Star Trek fans, we're attached to it. So to destroy it.
Well, and they said they went from 6 billion people on Vulcan to 100,000 or 10,000 roughly.
Right.
That's
planet.
huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Vulcans always were rather standoffish, but it's hard to believe there were only 10,000 off-world.
Right.
Or they had gotten off-world or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
The also killing Spock's mother the way they did, I don't think was successful because they've got her. So Sarek and Spock and these other council members and Amanda are all being transported up to the Enterprise, and there's a ground collapse under Amanda, and the transporter beam is in the process of dematerializing her, and she falls to her death. And it's like, I don't think the transporter works that way. It can track moving objects. Once it's got a lock,
Yeah.
it should have pulled her up, given the stage of transport they were at.
Given that the planet itself is already orbiting and moving. I mean, it's not stationary. I know the idea was to give Spock a reason to be emotional later so that Kirk can incite him and take command. But I just destroy the planet and then kill his mother, and just like, I don't know, it just felt too much.
I could see do one or the other, but not both.
Yeah. Right. That was if they had done Andor or another planet, Bajor.
Oh, take Betazed, please.
Yeah.
Risa, take Risa. That's fine.
Where are we going to go on shore leave now?
Yeah. No Counselor Troy in the Kelvin universe. Darn.
So but they do save the bearers of Vulcan's cultural history. I'm guessing they're all carrying Katras or something. That's what they were doing, sucking up all the Katras. Yeah. Nero apparently takes a line from Khan's book, and he's found these centurion slugs that are like the city eels that latch onto your brain stem and force you to answer. I'm sorry, that does feel kind of like a ripoff of Wrath of Khan.
Well, they even kind of looked like the eels from Wrath of Khan.
You find a different method to, truth serum sort of thing. I don't know, but a technological solution. But I guess there's a body horror aspect to it too. But I don't know.
There are other kinds of body horror that you could use to accomplish the same effect.
Well, and we don't actually see the effect of this slug.
Yeah.
You see it going in his mouth, and then next time we see him, he's apparently not under the effect of it anymore, but they've got all the information they need.
Yeah, that didn't make sense. And then another completely irrational, and you mentioned this, Jimmy. Kirk is undermining Spock's authority, and so Spock, rather than throwing him in the brig, which is what you should do, irrationally decides to put him in a escape pod and shoot him at a planet where he'll probably die because the conditions are so bad, and there are very dangerous animals wandering around.
It's literally the planet Hoth.
He almost does die.
Yeah.
The first thing he's almost eaten by one beast, and he's almost eaten by another beast, and he falls off a cliff. I mean, his life is endangered multiple times in the first few minutes he's there.
Yep.
Right.
And this is this is not good writing because what Spock did was totally irrational. And Kirk even notes it. He's got a little voice recorder with him, and he says, I believe this is in violation of, and he names a section in a protocol number
Right.
regarding the treatment of prisoners. I'm sure he's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
He could have Spock up on charges for this. In fact, that of itself, he's already demonstrated Spock is not acting rationally.
Right. Yeah, because later on when he meets old's Prime Spock, he tells him to, get him to react emotionally. It's like, I think he already has by throwing him off the ship. I think that's more than enough for any court martial to say.
Yeah.
Right.
And even if the predators here didn't get him, cold.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lack of food, lack of shelter, all those things.
At least he's got a duffel bag full of stuff.
So this was just abandoning, marooning an officer or even a cadet in this situation was completely ridiculous. It's also, the name of the planet is a problem. They called it Delta Vega.
Mm-hmm.
Delta Vega is a planet that we met at the edge of the galaxy in the second pilot where no man has gone before. And they knew it was not the same Delta Vega, but they called it that anyway. But Vega is a star.
Yep.
And Vulcan is not in the Vega system. In all of the standard literature, this is going to cause problems for longtime fans because longtime fans are going to know that Vulcan is in the Epsilon Eridani star system. And so Vega would be the fourth planet. Delta Vega would be the fourth planet in the Vega star system. Fine. But it should have the same it's impossibly related to Vulcan. Like you can see the black hole collapse in Vulcan from the surface of Delta Vega because Spock shows it to Kirk in a mind meld flashback. If it was that close, these would have to be twin planets. They'd have to orbit each other.
Or a moon or something like that. Yeah.
Or some common orbital thing. They're not orbiting the same sun. They have to be orbiting either each other or some other larger planet. But in which case they're both moons. But if you were, I just am not sold on the science of this. Even if red matter must form black holes in some completely unknown way that doesn't release X-rays and other forms of dangerous radiation that would have totally irradiated what's happening on Delta Vega.
It's the J.J. Abrams distance problem, right? It's just he just has this really bad way of writing space.
And, JJ or whoever wrote this part of the plot or named the planet, because, obviously he didn't write like everything.
No, it was Orsi and Kurtzman who named the planet.
Yeah. But, they went to like, Memory Alpha, which I don't think existed, but, they went to, books of Star Trek and, that sounds like a good name for the moon around Vulcan.
Right. Alex Kurtzman, who would later on go to make the reboot of Star Trek on TV. So Scotty is conveniently on this planet, and so we finally get to see Scotty, which I really
notice the two amazing coincidences: Spock and Scotty on the same planet. Who knew?
Apparently, Scotty killed Admiral Archer's dog.
Or no, just beamed him, and it hasn't
beamed back yet.
Back yet.
Yeah.
Could Archer still be alive? Archer?
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's not Porthos. Porthos wouldn't be alive.
Porthos would definitely be dead.
No.
By the way, I wanted to comment. So a lot of this information that old Spock gives Kirk is done in the form of a flashback, and he explains about the destruction of Romulus and all this stuff, and the destruction of Vulcan and so forth. And I thought it was creatively done, given that it's essentially a big exposition dump. Doing it in the form of a flashback in a mind meld, I think it works cinematically in a way that is a lot better than a lot of exposition dumps in movies. But then once we get to the Federation base where Scotty is, they have this idea of Spock knows obviously who Scotty is from the Prime timeline, and he says, "Aren't you the Montgomery Scott who proposed transwarp beaming?" And apparently he had, so you could theoretically beam onto a moving target at warp speed. okay, fine. But there's an aspect to this I like, and there's an aspect to it I don't. The aspect I like is Spock is doing his own transparent aluminum moment.
Yeah.
You know, he knows he's got the formula from the future for how to do this, and he's given it to the guy who's going to invent it.
Mhm.
And so that's nice. I like that. The problem is the transwarp beam in itself.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure we have seen beaming between two ships at warp,
Mhm.
but this involves way more than that. This involves beaming at vastly longer ranges. And if you can beam effectively between star systems, then
Need starships.
you don't need starships. This would radically change Federation technology and Federation culture.
Mhm.
And so I don't like having this super omnipotent beaming technology
Mhm.
introduced into these movies, because it's already hard enough to come up with reasons for the transporters not to work, to keep them from solving all kinds of problems every episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is just going to take it up an order of magnitude if you can beam between star systems.
Now imagine that the transporter takes the form of this big ring.
Yeah.
It sits on each planet. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. It creates a wormhole. Yeah.
It creates a wormhole between them, and it looks like water. We could call it a gate of some kind.
The Neota Gate. Neota is
Yeah, there you
Swahili
go.
for star.
Yeah, there you go. So they recruit Scotty, and they get, it's old Spock
Yeah.
stays behind for whatever reason. What happens to old Spock? Do we know?
Well,
Does he just die there?
No. He's at the end of the movie.
Oh, right. That's
Because
right.
there's the scene
Yeah.
between new Spock
believe
and
I
old
forgot
Spock.
that.
But he,
Yeah.
he wants to force Kirk and young Spock to work together. That's why he stays.
Mhm.
Right.
And so they beam back to the Enterprise. Kirk provokes Spock over his mom, telling
Gets
him,
to be a
you
jerk."
don't even
Yeah.
care about your mom's death. You are an inhuman computer. And Spock slugs him, which is enough for Spock to realize, I am emotionally compromised by this. I must resign.
More.
At which point, acting Captain Cadet Kirk, or acting First Officer Cadet Kirk, becomes acting Captain Cadet Kirk.
See, this is not what would really happen, right? Like
No.
the highest ranking commissioned officer would outrank Kirk. Even like Sulu would take
yeah.
command.
Let's assume the only actual commissioned officers on that ship when they left Earth was Sulu and Pike and Spock.
Right.
So yeah, Pike's gone, Spock resigns, Sulu is acting captain.
Or once Scotty gets there.
Or Scotty, yeah. That's right. Yeah, Scotty's an officer.
But we got to have Kirk in the center chair, so that's what we do. And then we have big action sequence. I'm not sure there's much, Jimmy, like you say, that when action sequences start, not much happes to talk
Yeah.
about.
No.
And I don't think there's a lot to talk about in the big action sequences.
Not really. The only thing I would note is that I have a few little brief things. But so at one point in the action sequence, Kirk and Spock are on Nero's ship. They've knocked out some of the Romulans, but they need to know where old Spock's ship is with the red matter, and they need to know where Captain Pike is. And to get this information, Spock goes over to one of the unconscious Romulans and does a mind meld with him.
All right.
And I like that as an information retrieval technique, doing it on an unconscious person to get the information they need.
Well, and you see it like the front end of the phaser switch. And so he purposely switches it from kill to stun, stuns
Yeah.
the guy, and then
Yeah.
switches it back.
Which is a clever thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly better than the mind rape that he did to Lieutenant Valeris in Star Trek VI, although that was very dramatic.
Yes.
Then I noted already the fist fight on the ridiculous catwalk without guardrails and ridiculous palm grips to stay on ledges. Like, sorry, our fingerprints do not give us enough traction to stay on the way Kirk is staying on the edge of that ledge.
Yeah.
And then he makes one of the Romulans that was menacing him fall to a very Emperor Palpatine, Luke Skywalker, Darth Maul fall.
Yes. So you're saying he had a chance?
I did note that Nero killed two significant people in this. He killed Kirk's father and Spock's mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And so he killed someone very close to both of our lead characters.
Yeah. And it
Yep.
gave them the motivation to do this. Yeah.
After the action sequence is all over, the Narada Nero ship is too close to the black hole. It's going to be destroyed and fall in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And and by the way, we have a black hole in our solar system now in the Kelvin timeline.
Isn't that
Yes.
convenient?
Yeah. But Kirk offers to evacuate, and Spock says, "Why are you doing this?" And Kirk is like, "I'm using logic. If we're going to have a hope of healing relations with the Romulans, doing this is the way to get there." And Spock acknowledges that, but says doesn't feel right in this case.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, Kirk makes the offer, which is good. It's what he should do.
Yep.
And Nero says, "I would rather die than take help from you," in essence. And Kirk says, "Okay, open fire."
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that's flat up murder. I mean,
Right.
if he refuses help and he falls into the black hole and gets crumpled by the spaghettification forces, that's not on you. But if you open fire on them to kill them all before that happens, you're a murderer.
Yeah. I mean, dumping the warp cores and exploding them to right next to where it would have been would also probably have killed him.
Mhm.
But that would be perhaps an unintended side effect.
That,
So-
that one would have been unintended, but
Yeah.
actually shooting to destroy the ship. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I know it was meant to be like, okay, Kirk is trying to be the better man. He's trying to, take the higher, reach out a hand of friendship, even though this guy literally killed one of our planets and was trying to kill another. But then when he goes, no, I'd rather die. Okay, you suit yourself. That's really all they were doing.
Right.
But destroying the warp core, which was actually warp cores plural, like 8 of them,
yeah.
Which
was,
made poop noises when they were fired out of the back of
Of
the
course.
Enterprise.
well, that was the gas ejection. But no,
Yeah.
but it was that was to save the ship. I mean, that was you could argue
Right.
that would be unintended consequences. That yes, to save the crew of the Enterprise, Nero would be killed.
Right.
And, not the intention though.
Not the intention. So we have the ceremony. Kirk is promoted from cadet to captain. I'm rolling my eyes now. If you can
Yeah.
watch on the video.
Yeah.
Pike's in a wheelchair temporarily. We'll see him standing around, but we seeing Pike in a wheelchair is significant for Trek fans.
Oh yes.
Then we have this encounter between young Spock and Prime Spock or old Spock.
There's a nice dialogue bit at the end of the promotion scene
Mhm.
where Kirk goes over to Pike, who's in the wheelchair, and says, "I relieve you, sir." And Pike says, "I am relieved,
Yes.
not I stand relieved,"
Which is the standard line.
But I am relieved. And he means he's not just relieved from command, but he's relieved that Kirk has lived up to his potential.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And also he's sitting down.
Yeah. In the old Spock, young Spock scene, old Spock is pushing young Spock to stay in Starfleet and convinces him, "Look, I'm going to go off and help rebuild our people. So you don't need to do that. You can stay here and fulfill your destiny as a Starfleet officer." And he wishes him good luck.
Yeah.
And they both make the Vulcan salute.
Yeah.
But Zachary Quinto, playing young Spock, had his fingers glued together so that he could do
it.
It's like, dude, I remember when I learned how to do the Vulcan salute as a kid, I'd have to grab the fingers and separate them, but it's not that hard. I even would do this I would imagine this with the middle fingers together as the Andorian salute and this with the middle fingers apart as the Vulcan salute, and I would alternate between them. So I'm sorry, suck it up, Zach. You don't need glue for this.
Yeah. I did like why old Spock didn't do the traditional live long and prosper, because he thought that would be a little self.
Right. He
Yeah.
says, "Since my customary farewell, live long and prosper," would appear oddly self-serving. I like that, oddly self-serving.
Yeah.
I shall simply say, good luck.
That's kind of a funny story. We'll talk about the salute. So this past week, as we record this, we had our priest retreat, and our presenter, who was a priest of this diocese, brought up Star Trek, and went, as he did, go on a tangent, and he's sitting there trying to do the salute, and he's doing the things with his fingers, and as I'm wearing one of my Lower Deck t-shirts.
There you go. It is actually, as Leonard Nimoy says, it originates in a Jewish blessing gesture.
does.
Yeah.
So
And that's where he brought up the idea of this salute, where he mentioned Leonard Nimoy's interview where he talks about that.
yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a good priest who is a Star Trek fan.
He is. He's also an excellent Bible scholar. Look up The Bible Priest on YouTube.
Cool. Any further notes on this one, Father Corey?
Nope. I think we covered
Jimmy?
everything.
Nope.
All right.
Oh, wait,
so-
there was one more.
Sure.
The Final Frontier was by
Oh.
Leonard Nimoy.
Mhm.
By Leonard Nimoy. Right. That was nice, especially given his death a few years later.
Yep.
Yeah. Very nice to have.
Not till after the next movie, though.
Right. All right, so that means we'd like to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode and added in all those lens flares. Right, Victor?
Oh, yes. There'll be one right over as you said that, I'm sure.
Yes, that's right. So that's it from us. What did you think of the 2009 movie, Star Trek? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/starquestmedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Or watch and comment on our YouTube channel where you can see us and you can leave a comment, like, subscribe, do the notification bell. That's all at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing, or let me get this straight, 11001001, the TNG first season episode about the Binars. Until then,
Yay.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Bye, Domenico. I'm Jimmy. Good luck.
And Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Thank you, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I like this ship. You know, it's exciting.